The morning sun cast long shadows across Buckingham Palace as staff members hurried through the corridors, making final preparations for what would become one of the most talked-about royal broadcasts in recent history. Prince William stood before a mirror in his private chambers, adjusting his ceremonial uniform while his mind raced with the weight of the announcement he was about to make to the nation. Queen Camilla sat in the green drawing room, her fingers drumming impatiently against the arm of an antique chair. The tension in the palace had been building for weeks, ever since rumors began circulating about changes to the line of succession and new responsibilities being assigned within the royal family. Palace insiders whispered about heated conversations behind closed doors, disagreements that had grown more intense as the broadcast date approached. The production crew from the BBC had arrived early, setting up cameras and testing equipment in the throne room where the historic announcement would take place. Director Sarah Mitchell noticed the unusual atmosphere immediately. Normally cheerful staff members seemed on edge, and there was an underlying current of anxiety that she had never experienced during previous royal broadcasts. Prince William's private secretary, James Harrison, reviewed the speech one final time. The document outlined a significant shift in royal duties, one that would see William taking on expanded responsibilities. While certain other family members would see their roles reduced, the implications were enormous. Everyone in the palace understood that this broadcast would reshape the monarchy's future. As the clock approached noon, Queen Camilla made her way toward the throne room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. She had not been consulted about several key aspects of the announcement, and her displeasure was evident to anyone who knew how to read the subtle signs of royal discontent. Her jaw was set in a firm line. Her usual diplomatic smile was nowhere to be seen. The palace guards noticed the unusual tension as well. Conversations that normally flowed easily between family members had become stilted and formal. Even the corgis seemed to sense something was amiss, staying closer to their handlers than usual and avoiding the areas where the royal family typically gathered in the media room. Journalists who had been invited to witness the historic broadcast began taking their seats. They sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Though none of them could have predicted just how dramatic the day would become, the carefully orchestrated world of royal protocol was about to experience an unprecedented disruption. William took a deep breath and began his walk toward the throne room, knowing that the next hour would either strengthen the monarchy's position or create a scandal that would dominate headlines for months to come. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier, and the decisions he was about to announce would test the very foundations of royal unity. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose the deep fractures within the royal family, fractures that had been carefully hidden from public view until this moment. As cameras prepared to roll and the nation waited for their future king to speak, the palace braced itself for what was about to become the most explosive royal moment in decades. The cameras began rolling at exactly 12:30 p.m., capturing Prince William as he stood regally before the throne, his voice clear and authoritative as he began addressing the nation. The broadcast was being transmitted live to millions of viewers across the Commonwealth, each word carrying the weight of constitutional significance. Queen Camilla entered the throne room just as William reached the most controversial portion of his speech. He was announcing a restructuring of royal duties that would effectively reduce her ceremonial role. While elevating younger members of the family to more prominent positions, the cameras focused on William failed to capture the flash of anger that crossed Camilla's face as she heard these words for the first time, standing in the back of the room. Camilla's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had expected to be consulted on any major changes to royal protocol, especially those that directly affected her position as queen consort. The fact that she was learning about these sweeping changes along with the rest of the world felt like a deliberate slight, one that she would not tolerate quietly. The production team noticed movement in their peripheral monitors but remained focused on William's delivery. He continued explaining how the monarchy needed to evolve with changing times, how younger royals would take on increased responsibilities in international relations and charitable work. Each word seemed to further diminish Camilla's traditional role, painting her as part of an older generation that needed to step aside. Palace staff, members positioned around the room, began to sense trouble. Lady Susan Pemberton, Camilla's longtime lady-in-waiting, could see her mistress's growing agitation from across the room. The queen consort's breathing had become noticeably faster, and her usual composed demeanor was beginning to crack under the pressure of public humiliation. As William moved into the section about modernizing the monarchy's approach to public engagement, Camilla took a step forward, then another. Her movement was subtle at first, but those who knew her well recognized the signs of an impending confrontation. The careful balance of royal protocol was about to be shattered in spectacular fashion. The BBC director, monitoring multiple camera angles, noticed unusual activity in the background but couldn't abandon the primary shot of the prince's historic announcement. The technical crew exchanged worried glances as they picked up what sounded like whispered conversations and shuffling feet. Sounds that were not supposed to be part of this carefully choreographed broadcast. William, completely absorbed in his prepared remarks, remained unaware of the brewing storm behind him. He spoke passionately about transparency, accountability, and the need for the royal family to demonstrate unity and purpose. The irony of his words about unity would become apparent within minutes, as the very foundation of royal harmony was about to crumble before the eyes of a watching world. Security personnel stationed discreetly around the room began positioning themselves more strategically, their training alerting them to potential disruption even before it fully materialized. The atmosphere had shifted from ceremonial grandeur to barely contained tension, with everyone present sensing that something unprecedented was about to occur. The moment of reckoning was fast approaching, and not even the most experienced royal watchers could have predicted how dramatically the situation was about to deteriorate. The explosion came without warning. Queen Camilla's voice cut through the solemn atmosphere of the throne room like a blade, her words sharp and unmistakably angry as she interrupted Prince William mid-sentence. The carefully scripted broadcast descended into chaos as she demanded to know why she had been excluded from decisions that fundamentally altered her role within the monarchy. William stopped speaking, his face flushing red as he turned to see Camilla striding toward the camera setup. The production crew froze, unsure whether to continue filming or cut to a prepared backup segment. The live feed continued rolling, capturing every moment of what would become the most shocking royal confrontation ever broadcast to the public. Camilla's words tumbled out in a torrent of barely controlled fury. She spoke of broken promises, of agreements that had been made when she married King Charles, with the respect that should be afforded to her position as queen consort. Her voice, typically measured and diplomatic, now carried the raw emotion of someone who felt betrayed by the very institution she had served faithfully. The journalists in the media room sat in stunned silence, their phones buzzing constantly as editors around the world realized they were witnessing history in the making. This was not the dignified, controlled royal announcement they had expected to cover. Instead, they were watching the royal family implode in real time, broadcast live to an audience of millions. Palace Security Chief Robert Manning stepped forward, his training taking over as he assessed the rapidly deteriorating situation. Protocol dictated that disruptions to official broadcasts should be handled swiftly and discreetly. But nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for a scenario where a senior royal was the source of the disruption. William attempted to restore order, his voice strained as he tried to address both Camilla's concerns and the watching audience simultaneously. His words came out jumbled and uncertain, stark contrast to the confident leader who had begun the broadcast just minutes earlier. The weight of the crown seemed to be crushing him as he struggled to maintain composure under impossible circumstances. The technical crew in the control room faced an unprecedented dilemma. Standard protocol would require them to cut the live feed immediately, but they were dealing with a situation involving the highest levels of the royal family. Commands flew back and forth as supervisors tried to determine whether they had the authority to end a broadcast featuring the future king. Regardless of how chaotic it had become, Camilla's voice grew louder and more pointed as she detailed her grievances. She spoke of years of loyal service, of sacrifices made for the good of the monarchy, and of the humiliation of being blindsided by changes that would effectively sideline her during what should have been her time to serve as queen consort alongside her husband, The palace staff watched in horrified fascination. As decades of careful royal protocol collapsed around them, Lady Pemberton moved closer to her mistress, hoping to provide some calming influence, but Camilla was beyond reasoning. The hurt and anger that had been building for weeks had finally found an outlet, and she seemed determined to be heard regardless of the consequences. As the confrontation intensified, it became clear that this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a fundamental breakdown in the relationships that held the royal family together. The carefully maintained facade of unity was crumbling, and there would be no easy way to repair the damage being done with each passing second. The situation reached a breaking point when Queen Camilla began gesturing emphatically toward the cameras, her royal composure completely abandoned. As she declared that the British people deserved to know the truth about the power struggles happening behind palace walls, her accusations flew like arrows, each one striking at the heart of the carefully constructed image the royal family had worked decades to maintain. Prince William's attempts to regain control of the broadcast became increasingly desperate. He moved toward Camilla, his hands outstretched in a gesture that was part pleading, part commanding, but she stepped back defiantly. The physical distance between them seemed to represent the gulf that had opened within the family itself, a chasm that might prove impossible to bridge. Security Chief Manning received urgent instructions through his earpiece from senior palace officials, who were watching the disaster unfold from other parts of the building. The order was clear but unprecedented. Remove the Queen Consort from the throne room immediately, using whatever means necessary to restore order to the broadcast. Manning hesitated for a crucial moment, knowing that his next actions would be scrutinized for years to come. The BBC control room had descended into barely controlled panic. Director Sarah Mitchell found herself making split-second decisions that would define her career and potentially change the course of royal media coverage forever. The technical team stood ready to cut the feed at her command, but she knew that ending the broadcast abruptly would only fuel more speculation and conspiracy theories. International news networks that had been carrying the feed live began making their own editorial decisions. Some cut away to their studios while others continued broadcasting the unprecedented confrontation. Social media exploded with real-time reactions. As viewers around the world watched the British monarchy face its greatest public relations crisis in modern history, Camilla's voice cracked with emotion as she spoke. About the loneliness of royal life, the constant scrutiny, and the sacrifices she had made only to be cast aside when it suited the institution's needs. Her words painted a picture of a royal family driven by ambition and political calculation rather than the unity and service they proclaimed to represent. The palace press secretary, Helen Morrison, burst into the control room with instructions to end the broadcast immediately. Her face was pale with the realization that every second of continued filming was creating more damage to the monarchy's reputation. The carefully planned narrative about modernization and unity had been replaced by a raw display of family dysfunction that would dominate headlines for months. Meanwhile, in the throne room, confrontation escalated as Camilla accused William of orchestrating a campaign to diminish her influence from the moment his father had passed away. She spoke of broken promises and secret meetings, of decisions made without her knowledge despite her constitutional position as queen consort. The assembled journalists found themselves witnessing history, but not the kind they had expected to record. Their initial excitement at being present for a major royal announcement had transformed into professional anxiety as they realized they were watching something that could fundamentally alter the British monarchy's relationship with the public. Lady Pemberton made another attempt to reach Camilla, but the queen consort was beyond consolation. Years of suppressed frustration and perceived slights had finally found their voice, and she seemed determined to ensure that her perspective was heard by the millions of people who had tuned in to hear about the future of the royal family. As the chaos continued, it became increasingly clear that there would be no graceful resolution to the situation while the cameras continued to roll. The moment of action finally arrived when Security Chief Manning received a direct order from the highest levels of palace authority. With visible reluctance, he approached Queen Camilla, his voice respectful but firm as he requested that she accompanied him from the throne room. The request was phrased as a suggestion, but everyone present understood it was actually a command that could not be refused. Camilla's response was immediate and defiant. She declared that she would not be silenced or removed like some common disruption, reminding everyone within earshot that she held the title of Queen Consort and demanded the respect that position warranted. Her words carried the weight of constitutional authority, creating a standoff that tested the very foundations of royal protocol. The cameras continued to capture every moment of the unprecedented confrontation. Manning found himself in an impossible position, caught between his duty to maintain order and the constitutional complications of physically removing a sitting queen consort. His years of training had prepared him for many scenarios, but nothing quite like this delicate balance of authority and respect. Prince William watched in mounting horror as the situation spiraled completely out of his control. His historic announcement about modernizing the monarchy had been completely overshadowed by this very public display of family discord. The irony was not lost on him that his speech about unity had triggered the most divisive moment in recent royal history. 2 additional security officers moved into position, their presence designed to emphasize the seriousness of the request for Camilla to leave. The queen consort looked around the room, her eyes settling on each face present as if memorizing this moment of ultimate betrayal. Her expression shifted from anger to something approaching sadness as the full weight of her isolation became apparent. The international media feeding off the live broadcast began providing running commentary on what their viewers were witnessing. Royal correspondents who had spent decades covering the measured, predictable world of palace protocol found themselves struggling to explain events that had no precedent in modern royal history. In a final act of defiance, Camilla turned directly toward the main camera and addressed the British people directly. Her words were measured but filled with emotion as she spoke about service, loyalty, the personal cost of dedicating one's life to an institution that could discard that service when it became inconvenient. Her impromptu speech was more compelling than any prepared remarks, raw with the authenticity that formal royal addresses often lacked. The production crew found themselves torn between their journalistic instincts to capture this historic moment and their understanding that they were witnessing something that would have profound consequences for everyone involved. The technical director's hands hovered over the controls that would end the broadcast, but he hesitated. Knowing that this footage would be analyzed for generations to come, Lady Pemberton finally reached her mistress's side, her presence providing a small measure of comfort in an increasingly hostile environment. She whispered urgently in Camilla's ear, likely reminding her of the long-term consequences of continuing this public confrontation. The queen consort's shoulders sagged slightly as she seemed to consider the wisdom of strategic retreat. Palace. Staff members positioned around the room stood frozen, unsure of their role in this unprecedented drama. The careful hierarchies and protocols that normally governed their every action had collapsed, leaving them to navigate uncharted territory where a queen consort was being asked to leave an official royal broadcast. The moment stretched endlessly, with tension so thick it seemed to press against everyone present. As the monarchy faced a crisis that would test whether centuries of tradition could survive as the harsh light of modern transparency, the resolution came not with drama, but with dignity that somehow made the moment even more poignant. Queen Camilla straightened her shoulders, looked directly at Prince William with an expression that mixed disappointment with regal authority, and announced that she would leave of her own accord. Her words carried the weight of someone who understood that this moment would define how she was remembered by history. As she moved toward the exit, flanked by Security Chief Manning and Lady Pemberton, Camilla paused at the doorway of the throne room. The cameras captured her final look back at the scene of her public humiliation, her face a mask of composed sadness that spoke volumes about the personal cost of royal service. The click of her heels echoed through the suddenly silent room as she departed. Prince William stood alone before the cameras, his prepared speech forgotten as he faced the impossible task of continuing a broadcast that had been irreparably damaged. The production crew waited for his signal, unsure whether to resume filming or end the transmission. that had already become one of the most dramatic moments in broadcasting history. The control room buzzed with urgent conversations. As BBC executives tried to determine their next move, the live feed had captured every moment of the confrontation, and they knew that this footage would be replayed and analyzed endlessly in the days to come. The decision was made to continue broadcasting, allowing William an opportunity to address what had just occurred. With remarkable composure considering the circumstances, William chose to acknowledge the disruption directly. He spoke briefly about the challenges facing any family, even royal ones, and his commitment to serving the British people regardless of personal difficulties. His words were carefully chosen, offering neither apology nor condemnation for what viewers had witnessed. The immediate aftermath was swift and dramatic. Within minutes of Camilla's departure, palace communications teams were drafting statements to manage the crisis. Press secretaries fielded urgent calls from media outlets around the world, all seeking official comment on the unprecedented breach of royal protocol they had just witnessed. Social media platforms crashed under the volume of commentary and speculation about what the confrontation meant for the future of the monarchy. Hashtags related to the incident began trending globally within an hour, with public opinion sharply divided between those who supported Camilla's right to speak out and those who viewed her behavior as inappropriate for someone in her position. Constitutional experts emerged from universities and think tanks to offer analysis on the implications of the incident. Questions arose about whether Camilla's actions constituted a breach of her duties as queen consort, and what precedent this might set for future conflicts within the royal family. In the days that followed, palace insiders leaked details about the tensions that had been building for months before the broadcast. Stories emerged about heated private meetings, disagreements over the direction of the monarchy, and the personal toll that these conflicts had taken on all members of the royal family. The broadcast that was meant to showcase royal unity and modernization instead became a defining moment that exposed the human frailties within an institution many had viewed as above. Such dramatic confrontations, the carefully constructed image of the royal family as a symbol of stability and continuity had been shattered in front of millions of viewers. Queen Camilla's removal from this broadcast became a watershed moment that historians would study for decades to come, marking the point where the modern monarchy's relationship with public transparency changed forever. The incident proved that even the most carefully orchestrated royal events could be derailed by genuine human emotion and conflict. The long-term consequences of that dramatic afternoon would reshape how the royal family operated, forcing them to confront the reality that in an age of live broadcasting and social media, there was no longer any such thing as a private royal moment.